On this episode of the Camp Owners Podcast, we have basically a camp summer comedian. No, really, truly, though, Emily Golinsky is our guest. She had Howie and I laughing, but also feeling inspired. And like we had learned so much in her sessions at Tri State. So we asked her to be our guest on the podcast. She is helping us to talk about how we can train our staff on initiative this summer, but also, as you'll hear, prior to camp. So what are those key takeaways on helping our staff with initiative, how to help them be motivated to do that on their own, and how to talk about it in the summer and manage it? So we hope that you love this episode. She is fantastic. She's so real and raw and funny and smart. So we hope that you feel the same way after you take a listen. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We are going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Hi, everyone. My name's Howie Grossinger. I'm the co-owner and director of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto, Canada, and a co-owner of Camp Walden, a overnight camp in Ontario as well.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kelly Shuna. I'm the co-owner and executive director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp, located in Stillwater, Minnesota. If you're looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Also, if you're listening to this and think it's amazing, and you think others would benefit from it in your circle or other camp owners, directors that you know, you can please feel free to send them a note to listen to us. So happy Monday is what it is. Howie, this is a great start to my week. I kind of like this.
Yeah, I think we've been doing some recordings at the end of the week. This is a great way to kick things off. We are near the end of the fourth season of the Camp Owners Podcast and have had a series of wonderful topics to discuss, and we're going to continue that today. I'm so excited. Kelly, we are just coming off the end of a wonderfully exciting and educational conference season. How was conferencing for you?
Oh, it was so good. I got to go to Tri-State, as you know.
So
Howie,
excited you came.
Howie and his team just took me under their wing, and I went to my first Tri-State, which was so exciting. I've been talking about it forever, and finally pulled the trigger because of Danny Meyer to come see him talk, and then Howie just made it so easy for me to come. So it was great. I really enjoyed my East Coast experience.
Well, I'm glad you joined us. It was wonderful to hang out. You are a member of the team in every sense. So thank you, Kelly, for making the time, and hopefully it can be an annual tradition. We love Tri-State so much. Really excited about today's topic and our guest, Kelly.
So excited. So our guest today had both of us laughing. I actually got to sit in the front row. It was like comedy hour and education all at the same time, which I loved. But yeah, this guest had both of us just laughing, and also even more so just really impressed with the information and education and knowledge and experience that they were sharing. So we are super excited to have Emily Golinsky on the show today. Emily's a longtime camp professional and now a trainer consultant who many of us in the industry are familiar with from Tri-State and other ACA events, and someone just who consistently brings great energy, insight, and expertise to important topics. She likes to say, like, shining a light on a bright light on many of the hard things that we deal with as camp owners and directors. So today we're going to continue our discussion about setting staff up for success. We always like to, in the spring, talk about something that can benefit camp owners and directors regarding training. So we're going to talk about setting our staff up to take initiative and how we can foster this in this next generation of staff that are working for us. So welcome to the show, Emily.
Kelly, thank you, Howie. I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to pod. Is it a verb? Do we pod? Is that what we're doing?
Sure.
Yes, we're definitely potting.
Okay, cool.
It's a verb now. It's a verb now. So yes, we're so excited to have you. We always like to start off, Emily, by having our guests share kind of like their origin story or how they got into camping and their experience thus far with the camp industry.
Okay. Well, how far back should we go? I was 4 when I first got on the bus to day camp, but
Sure,
that might take
sure.
our entire time if we go from there. I definitely was a camp kid. I went to overnight, as soon as possible. I think I was 7 my first summer, and I was at camp all the way through. I've only missed one summer at camp in my life since age 4, and that was while I was in pharmacy school. And shockingly, they wanted me to work in a pharmacy over the summer, instead of at camp. I know. So then I came back, got rid of pharmacy school, which was obviously the problem, and continued with my camping career. And I've worked mainly in the at-risk, underserved, behaviorally challenged population. Although I've also had experience at wonderful camps across the country that didn't serve those particular populations. And most recently, before I went out on my own as a consultant and a trainer, I was the executive director at Camp Starfish in Rindge, New Hampshire, for 15 years, give or take. And that is a fantastic camp for children with significant emotional, behavioral, social, and learning challenges. So that was really where my passion was. In providing camp for individuals who, for whatever reason, are potentially excluded from traditional recreation opportunities.
For sure. It seems to me that all of that has served you so well in what is now your full-time gig, as far as all the training that you're doing. And there's such a breadth of topics that you address based on your accumulated experience in the industry. Today, Emily, we're particularly interested, as has been a topic throughout many of the conferences that have taken place, around meeting the needs of today's staff, how we can, meet them where they're at, which I think is a very popular phrase that so many of us are looking at, because those of us who've been doing this for a while, I think, have come to the realization that if we just stick to our own ways of thinking about the way the job's done, or the way our staff are expected to do the work they've hired for, it's just not working for us in the way that it had in the past. And I think you've shone a light, to keep using the light metaphor, to talk about this. And the topic today, of course, is initiative. And you've talked a lot about, understanding today's staff, and just maybe some of the myths and facts about today's staff around the topic of initiative. And I think Kelly and I were very curious to kick off this conversation with sort of, the foundational sort of knowledge that you can provide around myths and facts about today's staff around initiative.
Well, I'll tell you, Howie. The thing is that I am solidly Gen X, right? And so like many of, right, and I think Kelly, you're right, and I don't know, Howie, I'm going to take a guess. Gen X, we're all
early Gen X.
Okay, early Gen X, cool. All right, so right, and like those of us in the Gen X generation, we all grew up with the work ethic being kind of our moral compass, right? If you wanted to succeed, you wanted to do well, you worked hard, you worked till you drop, and that really was who you were as a human being. Was how much you were willing to put into the job and things like that. And so I think it's interesting that many of us in this generation are now the camp directors and owners, and the staff that we are hiring have a very different lens on the working world, right? Gen Z is often considered like a lazy generation, and nothing could be further from the truth. The difference is that they're doing what I wish someone had us do, which is putting their mental health and their own self-care into the equation with their work time. And so with initiative, we can talk about some of the ways that Gen Z has not been set up for success with regards to taking initiative. But the biggest thing is to understand is that, like, they're not lazy, they're not miserable, and even if they were, frankly, it doesn't matter, because they're who our staff are, right? But I think it's really important to understand that they're a different beast. Every generation is, and this is the generation we have on staff now, so we have to understand them.
I like that idea. I am a note taker, but I think it's such an important tool just to think about the lens. The lens is so different. So, why do you think that that initiative is lagging, I guess. So we talked about like that's a different lens and they're prioritizing more of their mental health and just self-care into account with their jobs. So is that the core of it, do you think? Or you think there's other things as well that are being seen as no initiative, no hard work by Gen Z bosses and others?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think that is a statement of fact that we have to keep in mind. I think there are other factors as well. So this generation is a true digitally native generation, right? First generation to grow up not only with the internet and social media and smartphones, which you can say was the millennials, the generation between Xers and Z, but as part of their core day-to-day life, right? So they were literally born with a smartphone in their hand, to use a terrible example of the word literally. And so because of that, there are things like a significant over reliance on technology. And we were talking about this the other day. So like you sit down to watch a movie, right? And you're like, oh, I've seen that guy. I've seen that guy. Who is that? Okay, well, no one in Gen Z is like, tomorrow I'll go to the library and check out the card catalog and open up an encyclopedia and find out who that is, right? Within 4 seconds, they're on some app, you know, whatever app, pick an app. I don't want to name one because I'll be horribly uncool. It probably doesn't even exist anymore. Right. But they can get the information at their fingertips. And that's what their whole life has been. So in some ways, it makes them really curious because they can access all this information. In other ways, it's immediate. And so they are accustomed to having everything at their fingertips. So they have a decreased inclination to really independently seek out solutions, because they haven't had to. And they also have short attention spans because they're the real generation. So, right, since we're an audio podcast, the REEL generation.
Right.
Right. And distractions like every 2 seconds, advertising and skip ads and click here. And so it's challenging for their brains to focus on tasks that require any kind of sustained effort. Right. And the last thing I think is really important is there's a preference in this generation for collaboration. One of the great things about this generation is they are so inclusive. They are a truly inclusive generation. They want everyone to feel welcomed. It's a huge part of who they are. And so they value true teamwork. They don't like hierarchies and top down instruction and stuff. But that means when you ask them to do a task, they want to bring all their friends, right? And I don't need 17 people to plunge a toilet right now. I need
Right.
to watch the children or one person to plunge a toilet. But you know, goodness forbid anyone should be left out of this toilet plunging experience, right? Like we don't want to exclude anyone. So that's hard because sole responsibility isn't something they're really seeking. And again, these are generalities, right? Like we're talking about generations. It's a generality. You find oddballs in every mix, but I would say those are, I mean, to answer your question, like, those are the kind of core things that we're facing, trying to bring these folks into the workplace and set them up for success.
Yeah, I see. I think a big thing that you point on or hit on is that muscle memory. And Howie and I have talked about this. Like, there isn't a lot of practice with problem solving on their own and not having the solution, like you said, right there at the tip of their fingers. So they don't have the muscle memory to solve problems because they're probably not asked very often to solve problems on their own. And the attention span, that's such a big thing in that collaboration. So those are the things that.
And I also think that, you know, to Emily's point about, you know, I think we're more challenged than any other time now as employers about sticking to our rules around phone use. And, you know, this is really something that they live with. And while we can sit here and say the rule is the rule and, you know, like good luck to everyone who can truly have it not part of a third appendage or whatever it becomes, the phone. But, you know, this combination of, you know, I can do a lot of things while still having the phone, mom or dad. Like, I don't need to put it down because it's here and I can still pay attention. Like, you know, just to use Emily's sort of example, it's like family movie watching time is like so many things are going on now because you're watching the movie, but they're still watching the movie, but they're still on their phone. And it's part of this. Yeah. Does it drive you crazy, Kelly?
Yes, I hate it. I'm like, you can't be on your phone and watch whatever you're watching at the same time. Pick one. Just
Yeah,
pick one. It
I
drives
know.
me nuts. It makes me sound like an old lady, but I hate it
But
actually.
this is I think what Emily's saying is it's a generation that has kind of mastered all of that and is still, cares and can care and do those things. And just setting up your environment or your culture at camp to embrace all of these realities for, our young staff is really, really key. Emily, one of the things that I've heard you say that I'm really impressed with is how you include, people who come to us who've never had a job before, right? Maybe I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. Like, it's one thing to battle the initiative thing, but I found one of, and we don't necessarily have to get into this right now, but I felt that, helping us as camp directors, discover people's initiative skills or mindset around initiative, around people who've had work experiences before and some people who've never worked it before. And I want to congratulate you, because having us see it from that lens is so helpful, because we see so many, 11th and 12th graders who, this generation, many of them, this is their first job ever, no job experience. Maybe you could just add a little bit of your thoughts to that, because I think that's a really great way to look at this whole initiative piece too.
Yeah, I love that you remember that. So I mean, this is lack of experience is a huge piece of it. And what 15-year-old is supposed to have experience in today's day and age, right? This generation in general, when our staff come to camp, forget the generation, in general, we hire a young workforce, right? And then this generation, when we add that in, they're younger for their age than previous generations. So, and that's from a lot of different reasons, including, parent or guardians being protective, and that the world has changed. It's a scarier place. And so that protection, while we turn it into memes and we make fun of it, the lawnmower parent, the helicopter parent, all this stuff, it is the reality. And so our when we say they're younger for their age, they just don't have the experience that many of us had. And so, I said this at the conference. I was 12, 12 years old when my first job in the morning was walking down the street and getting two kiddos from my neighborhood ready for school. Got them dressed, got them fed, got them on the bus, right? I was 12. And then now, as a new mom, I'm finding out things like it's apparently like not super legal to like let your 12-year-old even come home alone after school anymore, right? So like a generation of latchkey camp owners, right? And the strength in us thinking, why can't a kiddo spend 4 hours alone at home? I'm sure they'll practice the piano. I always lied about doing it, right? Like, and instead we have these young adults who are coming into the workforce, and we truly may be their first experience of anything other than babysitting. And what I've recently learned is that even babysitting now, usually an adult is still home. So we're asking them to do a lot. We're asking them to take care of other people's children too. And we make such a big deal out of that in staff training, right? You're taking care of other people's children. We're entrusting you with all this responsibility. And the funny thing is that it's not that they don't want to do the job. One of the things that a 2023 survey of Gen Z and millennials found is that despite what all of us think as managers and supervisors, more than 50% of Gen Z respondents said it's not laziness that causes their inability to self-start, right? To take initiative. It's stress and anxiety. They live in a very stress-built world, and nothing has really set them up to handle that. And then we come in, yeah, you're going to be camp counselors. You got to do this, 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 and this, and don't mess it up because that's someone else's kid. And we're just kind of actually adding to that anxiety as opposed to setting them up to manage it and learn how to do their job.
So how,
Yeah, it's not that I think you're suggesting that it's not to not talk about those themes of the responsibility. It's about managing it given the new audience of staff that we have, and how to reassure them that, and I think you're really good at, mentioning this, and I'm sure we'll get into it, is like, if they understand the support that they have, if they understand that it's okay to make some mistakes and it's okay to do these things, I'd like to hear your thoughts on just the whole concept of making mistakes for this generation too, a little bit too. And we're going to get into some practices and training that maybe we can address. But Kelly, that's what kind of like sticks with me, and some of the themes that Emily's talking about is this, just the stress and anxiety of, I've taken on this job and Howie or Kelly has built it up to be this thing, as Emily said, and all of a sudden, like, oh God, I can't screw up. Right?
Mhm.
Like, you do find that too? Like, I'm feeling that.
Yeah, and hearing you say that, Emily, makes me think about, we want this to be tangible, right? How we had this time of year for people and takeaways for staff training. And what I immediately thought about when you said that, because we do at staff training, like it is a big deal and it is a big job. And I know all of us say that, like you are taking care of someone's most important thing in their life. We all get that as parents. But in that same breath, it's like that, I don't know if it was Brene Brown or who it is, like that name it to tame it, to then also say, this is also going to cause a lot of like stress and anxiety potentially about doing a great job and doing it right. And there's that pressure. So, I think that's for me, then that next step is how can we in staff training, when we are doing all the to-dos, how important is your job? How can we also help be proactive about that stress and anxiety that they're reporting that 50% of them have as that hurdle with self-starting and taking initiative?
That's a great question. I actually want to jump back a second to like before staff training, even because there's some stuff as owners and directors that we need to do to prep before staff even get on site. And so I think, and part of that is exactly what you just said, Kelly. It's removing fear from the equation. It's letting staff know how you are going to support them. And these are things not when they step on site the first day. I remember my camp director, when I was an assistant director, talked to me all about the opening day for staff and all the feelings and everything that's going on. And we almost created like a show for them. And this generation sees right through the show. They don't want the show. They want honest, real talk, except it has to feel safe for them. So we have to remove that fear. We have to tell them, welcome to camp. It is going to be stressful. As you said, Kelly, it's also going to be a lot of fun. Here are the supports in place from minute one for you. Here's who you go to if you have questions. Here's what we're going to be accomplishing this week. Here's our plan for taking care of you. If we start with a bunch of rules and policies and procedures, which are important, I'm actually a huge policy proponent. So, don't get me wrong. Like you said, Howie, we can't get rid of that stuff. But a lot of times we hit them over the head with it. And we send them home after day one of training or something like that, just their minds are buzzing with all the things they can do wrong. And then they get caught in the trap of this job is way too scary. So we need to remove fear from the equation. We need to let them know that they're allowed to think independently. We're not trying to create little robots that only do exactly what we tell them. And we need to build their competence. We need to figure out before we even get them on site, how do we know where their skill gaps are? Right? We are one of the only industries, camp is one of the only industries that I can think of where we hire a workforce and assume that everyone's coming in the exact same place and has to get to the next level in order to do the job. But in many industries, there's knowledge testing, there's skills inventories, there's online trainings before you even get to site that help you get to the place with the rest of your colleagues. For us, we just assume that our training is kind of one size fits all. And so we do have to give information and help them build competence and take the fear away and stop making the first day of orientation feel like this huge thing. Because that's where we lose people.
It's really interesting. My longtime associate director at Camp Robin Hood has always reminded our team, at the end of the first day of training, your staff should walk away feeling they made the best decision for their summer.
Yes.
And we frame the content of that day now, whether it's the separate new staff orientation evening or the first full day of returners and new people together. We've kind of settled into, and he's so on top of things. He sees it from such a great lens, Jeff does, and he's always reminded us our single most important goal of day one of orientation is to have them leaving, because we're a day camp, they go home between training sessions, is that they made the best decision for their summer work experience. And we've kind of, you know, had that as a bit of a guiding light for us. So I think when you were explaining that, Emily, I was thinking, like, I'm so glad Jeff has been in our ear about that for so long, because he's a high school teacher and he lives this population like 10 months of the year. So very astute.
Everybody
But
needs
I
one
thought,
of those people on staff. Everyone
yeah,
needs someone that works every day with the staff population. We have so many people that work well with kids.
yes.
But what we need now is people that understand the staff. And honestly, somebody that staff feel comfortable with, right? That's really, really important.
Mhm. When you were talking, I was thinking about how you said that as an industry, we don't really do a ton of pre-camp understanding of that knowledge gap, or where their confidence is low, or like you said, we one size fits all. So how do we make it more attuned to what they need? And one thing I thought about was, like, we do a new staff orientation via Zoom. We have ours in a couple weeks. And I know we do questions, but it made me think that we can do a better job of asking them, you know, what are you nervous about? Or like, what's your confidence level on different things? And I'm trying to think through a little bit of, like, it does help them to see each other's what they're nervous about and to know you're not alone, but also how can we then use that to determine some of our, like, get what you need sessions at camp? Or so I feel like that's something that I can take from this, is using that new staff orientation when they're all together. And if there is some of that anxiousness and stress, how can we, one, you know, like, name it to tame it, but two, help them to see that others are feeling similar, but also help it guide us for how we can cater some of that training that they need, because every group of staff is different every year. So
Yeah, look, we're not Microsoft, we're not Google, we're not spending millions of dollars on staff acquisition and training and things like that. We don't have it to spend. And we do need to understand, like you said, Kelly, like, where is how do we get them to where they need to be, right? And what is that access for what you need at camp? How do you get it? That sort of stuff. I think there are online, quizzes that people can take, but even short of asking people to do, skills inventories, I like your idea of asking questions during an orientation, and I like a really simple scale. Are you interested in this topic and happy to learn more? Do you have a baseline knowledge? Like, you could share one or two facts about it. Are you able to assist someone who's teaching it, or are you able to teach it? Right. And that tells you right there, like, where somebody is on the spectrum. And notice that even even the least educated option there is still, but I'm interested in it, right? Because we want that initiative out there. We want to say, like, even if you don't know how to do it, we want you to feel safe to say, I want to try it. If someone can show me the way, I'm willing to learn. I just don't have that skill right now. And giving people a chance to say that out loud. No, I have never been to archery training, and yes, I will happily be your archery instructor if you send me to certification training and let me, pick up a bow and arrow and practice at our range. Right? It's not just certifications for these folks. They need to feel really comfortable in the job where they're actually going to be. And so a lot of our training is classroom based. We're sitting there going through policy and procedure. We're looking through manuals. That's my Gen Xer hat again, right? Paper manuals, like open the book. Right?
I perked up when you said that, because that's what I think.
I mean, I have a drawer full of my favorite manuals, right? Like, I'm such a manual nerd. I also used to have a comb binding machine, to, like, make them. But I think what they need during training, right? And Kelly, to go back to your original question, because I took us off, is they're looking for meaningful work. That's one of the things that, like how you were saying, like, what makes them think they took the best summer job that they could possibly have? They want meaningful work. So we have to create that meaning for them. We have to be really transparent about why we're doing certain tasks or projects, right? What is the buy-in for them? That's going to translate into them wanting to put the effort in and take the initiative, right? They want to have a unique purpose. So we can't just say we're here for the kids. We need to help each single staff person understand their unique contribution to the direction the organization is going, right? So help them see themselves as young professionals and how this is going to help them along the way. it's a real mindset shift to those of us who, I mean, we even had bracelets printed one summer. It's like, it's all about the kids.
Yeah.
Right. That's the sale, right? Come work at camp. It's all about the kids. Give 150% of everything you have to someone else. That's not selling for this generation.
No.
That's what's stressing them out.
Right.
And a
And
lot of us still say that, I think.
I think we do. I think a lot of us say that. I think a lot of us also are catching ourselves too more than ever now. And when we say that too, because I think there's so much talk about this topic. Continuing on sort of this coaching initiative or creating an environment where initiative seems um, natural or at least encouraged and comfortable. It has me thinking too, Emily, I think a lot of us fall in the trap about the phrase, you need to actively participate with your campers, right? And
Oh, that's the
right,
worst.
right. And I know I'm guilty as charged. I still use
I
that phrase. It's a great thing. However, and the reason I bring it up, because you started talking about archery, and it started, I said, we say to our cabin leaders, our counselors, hey, when your cabin goes to archery, there'll be an instructor there, but you're expected to participate with the kids. But given what we've just talked about comfort and getting into the action, we've got to pay some actual tangible time so that when we say you got to go into a canoe with the kids, that we've taken time to set them up for comfort to go in a canoe with their kids, right?
Right. They have to learn it for the first time with their campers, that as a generation, they are terrified of that kind of failure or social pressure.
Right. I
That's when
just
they
think of,
call out instead of, they see canoeing first thing on the schedule the next day and suddenly, I think it's sick, boo, right? Like,
right.
we have
And
to
and I
protect them.
And I think that it's kind of overlooked. I think this whole topic has kind of, for me at least, illuminated the need for, setting up time to get them to practice or participate in activities they're expected to do with the kids without the kids, so that they're not feeling like, oh my God, my kids are going to see me not feel comfortable or anxious or things of that kind. Now, there's no guarantees they won't be anxious or stressed even when you do this. However, based on the lessons learned from your presentations and the stuff that I know that you're doing around coaching initiative, that's one that kind of stuck with me. Are there other things that come to mind on coaching up initiative that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you said, like trying things, the role playing, right? Many of us are huge proponents of role playing, and Kelly, I think you use that word muscle memory, right? We have to also build muscle memory specifically around initiative taking, right? So where they're going to experience common camp challenges, we want to encourage them during training to brainstorm solutions. And while that seems so obvious, sometimes even saying, we want you to brainstorm, we want to hear your solutions, right? A lot of times what we'll do is we'll do a role play, and then a supervisor will be like, so here's what you should have seen in this role play, and here's the solution, right? And what we actually want is for them to talk about, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? Because even if they're incorrect, as long as the supervisor says that's a good thought, here's why we do that, or here's why we don't, or here's another thing you could do instead. That building of the brainstorming and the communicating is the building block of initiative. If they don't feel comfortable in training to say, I think we should do it this way, they're never going to do it outside of training, right? And also, I think our supervisors need to hear, right? Our supervisors on the ground during training need to hear, like, what's old hat to us. Like, of course you do it XYZ way. That seems normal to me because I've been in the industry for 20 something years, 26 years at this point, right? As a supervisor and a leader. But for a 15, 16, 18-year-old, it's brand new, right? And they've never had anything like it in their lives. So having them understand explicitly what their role is. And then this is the other piece, the case studies, right? Giving them some actual things that happened in previous summers, not the terror stories, right? Like, we don't want them running for the woods, but looking at situations that you've had at camp where staff did take initiative to solve the problem, where there was creativity used that came directly from the staff, and sharing those case studies and highlighting why it was successful. And then on the flip side, highlighting a couple times when initiative would not be welcome, right? Like, We want them to put their initiative skills in action in the right place. We don't want them wasting their energy and then just hearing thanks, but it's not welcome. So we want to be upfront and tell them, here's when you're going to have opportunities for creative initiative taking. When we are unrolling the opening ceremonies of our 140-year-old Olympic ceremony, that's not the time to be like, I think we could do it a different way, right? That's not a
Totally.
useful use of your time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you were talking about canoeing and like with you with archery, Howie and Emily, when you're talking about scenarios, something that's been on my mind and on my to-do list is every year my staff wants more and more behavior scenarios. Like, how do I handle this? And we have a really fantastic, like 3 different parts of our behavior training. But what I've been thinking about for this summer is how can I, when we're at archery or at canoeing or at the sports field, having a moment for like behavior scenarios and problem solving when you're actually at archery, what are some common behaviors we see here and how can we problem solve that behavior or though, or even like you said, just with initiative, even some things that can come up. So I love that idea of having some set scenarios, using your long-term staff even for similar ones, but doing it in the moment. Because like you said, when we're in a gymnasium where we do lots of our PowerPoint or big group things, that's not as applicable if they're actually out at canoeing with a life jacket on and a paddle and we have a scenario of a camper doesn't want to go. So I do like helping them, give them that experience, but also giving experience problem solving some things that will happen in the moment, or like how you talk about issues maybe on the bus. So if you're doing bus training, like doing
Exactly.
scenarios and things that they might have to take initiative on, like you talked about, Emily, or behaviors that come up, like, all right, what do we do? And having them give ideas and collaborate together, which they like, about how we can manage that. So I really like that example that you
Mhm.
gave.
I also, maybe we can extend this conversation from the 15 to 18-year-olds who've never done this work. Perhaps, Emily, for your advice on middle management, the first-time supervisors and initiative, you know, those staff who have grown up with you being supervised, but now they're part of a layer of our staff organization where now they've stepped into a role where initiative in terms of managing camper and staff behavior and expectations of staff. It sounds like a lot of what we just talked about scenarios and case studies is equally applicable to those, you know, roles in training. But we're also at a time of the year, as people are listening to this, where they're probably meeting with their team of unit heads, division directors, etc. Can we get some thoughts on that aspect of initiative coaching, initiative development, because it's still the same generation of staff that are assuming these roles now?
It is. And last year they were a cabin counselor and now they're a supervisor. And suddenly our expectations of them have jumped. And in fact, they're sitting there going, I just wanted to be a counselor again, right? Like so I think it's core supervision training, right? What does it mean to be a supervisor? What are the expectations that you had of your supervisors last year? And where were those expectations met and where were they maybe lacking? Like we don't have to call out names, right? But
For
what
sure.
what did you want from your supervisor? And you said, when Howie called me up and offered me a job on the supervisory team this summer, I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to do what so and so did, I'm going to do X, right? So okay, then do you know how to do X? Why didn't you like what that person did? What was the problem with it? Right? And then if you want to be different, because this is what I've heard, for years and years with leadership training at my own organization, we would start with, what do you want to change about how supervision was kind of felt across the staff team last year? And they had these huge lists. But then when you put up the next piece of paper and say, okay, how do we do that? Dead silence, right? They're like, well, that's your job, is to show us. I'm like, but I've taught previous leadership staff too, and you're saying you didn't like what they did. So you have to come up with some of the solutions. If you want to be X type of supervisor, what skills and knowledge gap do you have to do that? And then how can I help you get those skills? This generation, again, part of it is just the fact that everything is high tech and so available, and also, AI and all this other stuff. And I know I sound like super old. There's no problem with any of that, except that it generates answers for them. And so they look to other sources for those answers. And when things get hard and those other sources aren't standing right next to them, then they shut down. So they need to practice supervising and they need to do those scenarios, but they also need to understand where they actually are. They need some self-reflection about their actual skills and whether or not what they want to do is realistic in one season. And helping, right? So helping them understand all of the elements of supervision that they need to accomplish. And one of them is positively coaching their staff on initiative, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff they also need to do.
And I think that some of the stress and anxiety producing elements of taking on these roles is that they have to be like supreme leader, skilled right from the start. Like for us, it kind of, that we've adopted this mindset of, we've tried at least, to on the job training, right? This constant approach to, we're getting you ready for the first day of camp, but there's going to be so much as we go. And I think one of the things that I also, of course, loved about your presentation is about this ongoing coaching. And I think it sounds like you're a huge proponent of, whether it's your 16-year-old first-time counselor or your supervisor of your, grade 3 unit at your camp, this constant feedback coaching. Have you found, or do you have any tips for, thoughts around how you can incorporate sort of the check-in mindset for your typical frontline staff and your supervisory staff? What comes to mind on the topic of on-the-job training?
Yeah, I think I was promised easy questions. And I don't know if you're holding up your end of the bargain. These are complex topics that we're trying to get into an hour here. I'm scared I'm not going to do it justice.
Oh, didn't I
Think
tell you that we're going on for 3 hours? No, just joking.
I do. I appreciate your faith in me that I would have these answers. I think the biggest thing is not the biggest. I don't know. I could identify the biggest. I think one of the things is making sure that our supervisors understand that coaching staff is a part of their role. There are 3 pieces to being a supervisor, right? There's supervision, core supervision, like you have to do this task and I have to make sure you do it. And then you have the mentoring, right? Which is the optional part of like, I want you to be a better something or other. Would you like to take some time outside of your work job to go down that road? And then you have the third one, which is where a lot of our supervisors get stuck, which is the coaching. You can coach someone for hours and hours. It doesn't necessarily make them better at their job. So one of the things I think we do need to tell supervisors is they have to get better at, and we need to help them get better at identifying who is coachable. Everyone is supervisable, right? We can supervise everybody, but not everybody is open to coaching. And some people don't have a desire to build initiative skills. So if as a supervisor, you have a staff member that you are seeing not take initiative, there is a set of steps you can take, observe them, share your expectations, give them examples, right? And I can share what some of that language would sound like. There are steps you can take. If that person is not, if their personality is not such that they're ever going to take initiative, then the supervisor needs to know kind of when to cut bait and like acknowledge, okay, so here's what you need to do your basic job. I'm going to go try and get someone else to take initiative in this area, because it does burn out supervisors, especially new supervisors, when they're trying to coach their staff and they're not getting anywhere. There's 2 pieces to that. There's the learning piece and there's the personality piece. If we're not hiring for high initiative candidates, then to expect people to learn and actually implement initiative at the level we need within a 6, 8, 7, 10-week summer is a big ask of a general supervisor. It's a big ask of a professional supervisor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have to be careful there and not put those expectations on our supervisors beyond what is reasonable.
I don't want to sidebar, but what I just heard you say is you said if we didn't hire for initiative. So I want to ask quick, can you hire for initiative? Like, I was curious to hear you say that, because do you think that we can hire for initiative, or it's more should be something that we focus on teaching and coaching?
there's a huge piece of this that is about hiring for initiative for sure. There are specific key skills of a high initiative candidate. Their communication skills, how they take ownership over things, whether they feel responsible for the outcome of tasks that they start, how adaptable they are, what their comfort level is with risk taking. They have a proactive mindset. Do they wait for instructions in general, or do they actively seek out opportunities to contribute, right? Do they have a challenge mindset? Are they open to continuous learning? All of those things and many more you can hire for. You can seek out those candidates, you can ask interview questions, you can check references to guide yourself. And an entire team full of people that have been hired for initiative is going to drive you up a tree, right? If every single person on your team is constantly taking initiative, who's plunging the toilet? Who's doing the core work, right? Because there's two kinds of taking initiative. There's taking initiative to do the core tasks. And then there's the kind of initiative where someone sees a problem or what they think is a bug in the system and says, "Ooh, I have a plan for that." Right? That was my problem as a camp counselor. I was a camp director before I was ever a camp counselor. I saw everything and I was like, "Oh, I want to fix this. Oh, what if we did it this way?" And my camp directors were like, "Yes, yes, but if you could watch the children, that's what we hired you for." Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think Kelly and I have a few people in mind who are that person too. And are, it's, it's true. I'm so glad we're talking about that topic as well, Cal.
yeah, I'm hoping people are done hiring, close to hiring, like, but I just was curious when I heard you say that about hiring. I sure wish I could have seen Emily as the camp director before you were a counselor. I kind of would have eaten that up. Anyway, I digress. What I want to do, okay, so I want to summarize some of the things you pointed out for us and then see if there's any final thoughts for listeners regarding training on initiative, either at staff training or during the summer. So you've talked about even prior to opening day, like removing some of that fear, telling them who they can go to, how you're going to take care of them, building their confidence. You've also talked about, with our problem solving scenarios, getting them to talk and collaborate. You've talked about middle management and them identifying like some self-reflection and also what they can accomplish in the summer with staff. But are there any other things you really wanted to make sure we chatted about regarding coaching staff to take initiative before we move on to your final amazing tips that we have?
I think we've covered a lot. And so no, I think that was pretty much it. I think maybe the one thing I would say is teach your supervisors to be comfortable, and your directors, everybody, right? Everyone should be comfortable letting someone know when they see someone not taking initiative, right? And it doesn't need to be mean. It can just be very, very straightforward, right? I've noticed you haven't been taking a lot of initiative in solving problems or being creative in your problem solving this session. We really value that ability to think on your feet. How can I help you with this right now so that you are able to do this and feel comfortable with it, right? And it is an awkward skill to have difficult conversations, but giving your core supervisory team some language to address it, and encouraging them to have staff reflect, right? Can you help me understand why you hesitated to take action in that situation? Is it something that we're doing? Is it something you've heard us say? Is it just who you are? Like, how can we help you feel comfortable? And if you didn't hear us say it 75 times during training, we want you to take initiative and self-initiate when you can. And if you're not sure how, here are the people you can ask. So I think just reiterating that, as you said, Howie, like the ongoing training, the ongoing learning, making sure that people don't just say it once in training and then assume staff are going to be able to do this thing. We have to continue to let them know it's important. So yes, I guess I did have something else to add.
No, I like that. I like that. And using the word initiative and even saying in training, like, you know what, with smartphones and technology, like a lot of things are right there for you. So this will be a challenge in initiative. I think even bringing that up at training, like this will be a whole summer exercise on initiative. So I think even just getting that word out there. So when you bring it up, like this is an example of where I'd like to see more initiative. So I do like that about using the actual word versus like, yo, you're mailing it in.
Right.
We got to figure this out. You would not recommend doing that. Okay. Thank you for
I
clearing
wouldn't,
that up.
mainly because this generation doesn't know what mail is.
Yes, you're right. You're right. They're like, what's mail?
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, trying to teach
What
my daughter how to write a letter. I was like, do I have to write the 3 lines? Like, what's happening here? Oh, anyway, I
That's
digress.
so great. That's so
That is
great.
good. Okay, that's an old school reference. Take it off the list.
I do it all the time.
Oh yeah.
That's good. That's good. All right, Emily, we are wrapping. We're switching things up a little bit here today. We're kind of going Brene Brown, how she does like her, oh, why can't I think about it's rapid fire. That's what it is.
Yeah,
We're
rapid
at
fire.
the end here. Thank you. At the end. We're gonna be more rapid firing at the end of our podcast. Yes, get those fingers warmed up.
Yes.
So you had suggested, we were talking back and forth about trying to narrow down what we want to talk about in this podcast because you're just a plethora of information. But you had said you have like a list of the things you need to remember to not forget. So we want to end with some rapid fire tips from Emily on the things that we should be thinking about right now that we can't forget. Are you ready?
Okay. All right, you ready?
All right, hit us. Yep.
These are totally random and bizarre. Okay, so we'll start with one that's really obvious, which is it's time to place orders, folks. Right? Camp vendors, not like Amazon, they need time for order fulfillment. You want quality stuff from our camp industry vendors. We want to support the people that support us. And you cannot like call them and say, I want 743 shirts silk screened for each unit, 3 days before camp. It doesn't work that way, right? All right. Next thing, it is time to order your labor compliance poster. Now, this might depend on what state or country you are in, but most of us have to print out a ton of notices and post them for staff, right? This is your wages laws and your, all of this different stuff. And it's real easy to miss something. And then your camp inspector gets real upset. You can go online for like $29.99. That's US dollars. So there might be some, difference. And buy this giant poster. It's the size of a piece of plywood. And it's laminated and it's beautiful. And it has every legal document that you're required to post for your employees on one thing. And it comes rolled up in a little tube and you stick it up with 4 staples and you are done. And it is a gift and the best $30 you will ever spend. Okay, I have 2 more. Check your camper balances the week before the session. You're trying to cram all these kids in. You're telling your staff you're going to have 14 kids in your group. Well, if you have kiddos that haven't paid since they made their original non-refundable deposit, this is the quickest way to know if they haven't turned in their health paperwork and they haven't made a payment. The chances are they're not showing up on Monday, right? So that's a great way to remind yourself that you might actually have some spaces that you can take off the wait list. So instead of no-shows, you're able to fill them the week before. All right, here's my last one. You ready? I told you this was so random. Here's my last one. It's called Don't Forget Grandma. Okay, and this comes from the fact that as I mentioned at the beginning, I went to summer camp all summer, my whole life. My grandma's birthday never changed. It was always in August, right? And so hard for me once I got into camp management to keep track of things of my life outside of being a director, right? You just like it's like it's May and then it's September, and then in the middle there's all these people that are like, oh, do you still love me? And you're like, oh, yes, and I kind of forgot to let you know. So if you have someone, going back to the mail, if you have somebody in your office that is responsible for like putting stamps on real envelopes and like mailing bills or checks or stuff, rewrite cards, birthday cards, anniversary cards, anything that you actually mail, pre-write it, put a sticky note on it. It's addressed and stamped. Give it to that lovely person in your office that is actually responsible and thinking about stuff that goes out in the mail and say, please mail this on August 13th. It's a birthday card for my grandma, right? And then you will never forget grandma and people will still love you even though you're actually thinking about Camp Olympics. They're like, oh, she took time this summer to think of me. And you're like, well, I took that time in May, but yes, I did. So that is my short list of completely random things to think about at this time of year as we're getting ready for camp.
Wow. I think, well, I just took notes. They're going in the show notes. They will be in the episode notes so please check those out, listeners, for sure. Emily, that is a great list of little things and things that are not so little, but things that can get lost in the shuffle, which I think is the theme of all the things that you're mentioning here. And of course, as camp owners, collections of fees are always a high priority. So
Right.
I think it's really good to remind us that you never know when that spot will open up. Wow, amazing, Emily. Wonderful to have you. Your insight and your perspective is so refreshing and so relevant. And we're so glad we were able to get you um, on the show. And but the show wouldn't be possible without our amazing sponsors. We want to thank Camptivities and Camp Brain for all of their support of the work that Kelly and I do on this podcast, and their continued support is so appreciated. As we end this episode, Emily, we go through sort of a quick update to our listeners on how people can get a hold of us if they want to learn more about Bright Moose, for example. Tell us a little bit about how our listeners can connect with you, either online or through direct contact.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for having me on the podcast. I absolutely had a blast, and I appreciate you both so much for making this so much less painful than I had anticipated it being. It was actually
Yes.
really, really fun. We should do it again sometime. All right. So how do they get in touch with me? Email is great. I'm just Emily, Emily, at brightmoosetraining.com. So it's bright as in shiny, moose as in, the big animal, and then training.com. So Emily at brightmoosetraining.com, or my website, brightmoosetraining.com. And
Amazing.
I love to hear from people, and happy to connect.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks for that. We'll definitely have that in the show notes. And Kelly, if people want to get a hold of you.
All right, I kind of feel like I have to act out my email address too, like Emily did with Bright Moose. So mine is Kelly with a Y at hidden pines ranch.com. Howie, now it's your turn.
That was
We
so
might get
awesome.
we might
That
get
was
more
fantastic.
YouTube. We might get more YouTube viewers after some of these like visuals. I don't
Well,
know.
first of all, if I'm in a charades tournament, I'm selecting you guys like draft pick like 1A, 1 and 1A for
It could
sure.
be fun. It could be
So
fun.
amazing. Well
That's a really
done.
nice draft.
I'll leave the acting to you guys. I will just say you can reach me at Howie at camprobinhood.ca. Always open to anyone who wants to reach out and talk camp or give us some ideas for future episodes. Folks, thank you so much. Please don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff there, from not only from our show, but the other wonderful Go Camp Pro podcasts that are out there. We hope you enjoyed this. Emily, thank you so much. Kelly, my friend, thank you. I love doing the show with you. Thanks so much. Thanks for listening, everyone. And we'll see everyone next time on the Camp Owners Podcast. Thanks so much.